Thank you for joining us today. Could you share some insights into your life before the near-death experience? Sure. I lived and worked Seattle area. Specifically in Kakainen County, I was a supervisory department of the juvenile courts. I truly loved my role and found great fulfillment working with adolescents. I would often say that I'd continue in that job until the day I died. I had no idea how prophetic that statement would turn out to be. That's interesting. So, what was it that led to your near-death experience? It all started on March 13, 2009. I ended up with a kidney stone that got lodged on my right side. I had experienced kidney stones before, so I recognized the signs immediately. How did you initially approach the situation? At first, I thought I could simply ride out the pain or push through, thinking it would eventually ease like it had in the past. But this time, the pain didn't subside. What did you do next? I recall heading straight to the emergency room. I was pretty nonchalant about it. I walked in and casually mentioned, "I've got a kidney stone on the right side." I was familiar with the routine. They'd take me to a room, administer morphine, and the pain would gradually fade. Did everything go according to plan at the hospital? Not entirely. It turned out that I also had a kidney infection, so they prescribed antibiotics to treat that. The doctors decided to keep me overnight and scheduled a procedure for the following day. How did the procedure go? The surgery itself went off without any complications. They managed to break up the stones as expected. However, what we didn't know at that time was that I was one of those rare cases for whom the antibiotics didn't successfully fight off the infection. That sounds serious. What happened as a result of that? After they broke up the stones, the infection, which had essentially turned into poison, entered my bloodstream. I went into septic shock, and my body started shutting down. It wasn't just my heart and lungs. Everything began to fail. That must have been terrifying. What do you remember from that moment? You know, what stands out to me is how little fear I felt when I realized I was dying. I'm a devout Christian, and I truly believed that upon death, I would go to heaven. So when I understood what was happening, all I could think was, I'm going home. Can you tell us more about what happened after that? According to the medical records, I was declared clinically dead for approximately 2 hours and 10 minutes. But my experience at that time was completely different. I recall leaving my body and shooting through the hospital floors, traveling up into the blue sky, and even venturing into outer space. It was astonishingly fast. How fast would you say it was? It's difficult to explain, but there's a verse from the Bible that always comes to mind. To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. That's exactly what it felt like. I was moving faster than the blink of an eye. By the time the eyelid met the bottom, I had already reached heaven. That's incredible. What did you see as you were journeying? As I was entering that realm, I distinctly remember seeing something that many describe as a light at the end of a tunnel. For me, though, it appeared more like a window. I'm not saying it was a window, but it's the best way I can describe it. What happened when you passed through this window? When I passed through that window, everything was perfect. It was pure peace. There was nothing wrong, nothing to upset you, nothing that could annoy you. It was complete serenity. If you are not subscribed, I recommend subscribing and activating the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. How did you feel in that moment? For me, the most striking and unforgettable feeling was the overwhelming sense of belonging. It's hard to explain, but I hadn't even realized how deeply out of place I had felt in my earthly life until I experienced that moment in heaven. When I arrived, there was this instantaneous awareness that I was meant to be there, that I was welcome, that I fit perfectly. It was a feeling of homecoming, of finally being where I was always meant to be, and it washed over me like the most comforting embrace. Before this experience, I never truly knew how much I had longed for a place where I could simply belong, where everything around me would align with the deepest parts of my soul. What truly stunned me was that heaven wasn't just a place of peace, it was alive with warmth and love. Everything around me, everything, seemed to greet me with open arms. And when I say everything, I mean everything. It wasn't just God Almighty, Jesus Christ, or the Holy Spirit who made me feel at home. I felt the very atmosphere of heaven welcoming me, and it was so much more than I could have ever imagined. There were trees there, trees that seemed to smile at me, if trees could smile. the flowers. They too had this subtle yet undeniable aura of joy as they reached toward me. I couldn't even look at a leaf or a petal without feeling as though it were saying, "We're so glad you're here. You belong." You might think I'm exaggerating, but there was this constant, gentle resonance around me that felt like the whole of heaven was glad to have me there. It wasn't just the heavenly beings, it was the entire environment. A feeling that every blade of grass, every gust of wind, every glimmer of light in that place was celebrating my presence. The sheer, all-encompassing love in heaven was a revelation in itself. It was as though everything there, from the smallest stone to the grandest expanse, knew I was home. It was profound. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. As for my desire at that moment, I didn't even fully grasp it until I was there. But once I did, I knew it above all else. I wanted to see Jesus Christ. I had an unspoken yearning to see him face to face, to meet him in person. It wasn't just the place I longed for, but the person. Heaven wasn't merely a destination, it was a relationship with him, and everything in that moment made that undeniable. The pull to be with him was so magnetic, so powerful, that nothing else mattered. I was walking through a forest in heaven, and something in my heart whispered that Jesus was just beyond the trees. There was no doubt in my mind that I had to push through to see him. The trees seemed to part for me, guiding me toward him, almost as if they knew that I had to see the King of Kings. As I moved through the clearing, the trees felt like they were cheering me on, as though they were chanting, "He's about to meet the King! He's about to meet the King!" The trees themselves were filled with this undeniable sense of joy, and it only made my heart race with anticipation. And then, finally, I saw him. Jesus was standing there, facing a crowd of what seemed like millions, billions, maybe, of angels and redeemed souls, all of them looking toward him in reverence. There he was, radiating glory, yet so humbly standing in the middle of it all. I approached him, but I couldn't just stand before him. I had to kneel. I fell to my hands and knees before him. I was so overwhelmed, so unworthy, but deeply moved by the fact that he was there. I couldn't tear my eyes away from his feet, those holy feet. And even though I was so close, I couldn't bring myself to look at his face yet. I could only see his feet, but somehow that was more than enough. And at that moment, everything about me, every single part of my being, knew with a certainty that I would never be able to express fully. The only reason I was standing in heaven, the only reason I was alive at that moment, was because of him. It was the most humbling realization. He had done it all for me. And not just for me as a part of the collective, but for me. It felt like heaven, with all its beauty, was created just for me. Though I knew that was far from the full truth, it was how I felt at that moment, and I don't think I can properly describe how deeply it moved me. I wasn't being selfish, but I couldn't help but feel that he had made all of it, everything, for me. It was a love so deep, so personal, it left me breathless. I remember whispering over and over, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." The gratitude inside of me was bursting, overflowing, and there was nothing I could do but offer my thanks again and again. His sacrifice, his love, was the reason I was there. The only reason. Then, my gaze moved upward, and as I took in the rest of him, every part of his being communicated love. His ankles, his calves, his knees, his hands, his arms, his body. All of it exuded a love that I could hardly comprehend. And when I finally looked up to his face, the look he gave me was something I will never forget. It was as though he was seeing me, truly seeing me, as if I had never ever disobeyed, as though I had never made a mistake in my life. In that look, there was complete acceptance, complete forgiveness. His love was so profound that it erased all the weight of guilt and shame I had carried in my life. That was when I truly understood what it meant that God forgets our sins when he forgives us. I could feel that forgiveness in every fiber of my being, and it made me realize the depth of his grace. I was made clean. I was made whole. I knew in that moment that I was eternal, that I would never die. My body had passed away, but my true essence, the real me, the soul, would live forever. After that, Jesus gave me a mission, a directive. As I stood there, he looked at me and said with peaceful certainty, "No, it's not your time. Go back." And just like that, I was back in my body, back in the life I had left behind. But it wasn't the same. How could it be? I had seen eternity and felt divine love, and now I was to return to a broken world. As I was sent back, something incredible happened. I didn't walk back through that forest. I soared above it. It wasn't flying in the traditional sense. I didn't flap wings or have to exert effort, but more like a thought that manifested into reality. I simply willed myself to rise above it all, and just like that, I was hovering above the trees, moving effortlessly toward my destination. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. I couldn't help but feel that heaven had already become a part of me, that it would always be with me, and that someday I would return to the place where everything welcomed me home. The best way I can describe this experience, if you've read your Bible, is like when Jesus walked on water. There was no fear, none at all. It was pure freedom. You could move anywhere and rise as high as you wanted, without hesitation or limits. That sense of weightlessness, of absolute trust, was unlike anything I had ever known. It wasn't just the absence of fear, it was the presence of confidence so deep, so unshakable, that it felt like second nature. When I reached the place where I knew I would leave, it wasn't as though there was a door or a gate. There was no grand exit. I just knew, deep in my spirit, that if I took the next step, I would be out of that realm. It was a strange and profound moment. I stood there, lingering, because something inside me wasn't quite ready. And when I realized that my body back on earth wasn't ready either, oh, the joy I felt. I was overjoyed that I wasn't leaving yet. Every part of me rejoiced in that delay, in the chance to stay just a little longer in this indescribable place. So what did I do? I turned around, and with a heart bursting with joy, I shouted yes. It was a moment of pure, unfiltered celebration. Before me was the forest again, and I knew Jesus was still on the other side, waiting. But something inside me told me I didn't have to go straight through the trees this time. I could go around. And so, with excitement bubbling up inside me, I moved to the left of the forest. And, oh man, all of creation responded with such joy. The beauty of what I saw next is something I struggle to put into words. There were mountains that moved. Not in a chaotic way, but in a rhythm, in a harmony that felt alive. They rolled like ocean waves, moving past me with a grace I had never seen before. They weren't bound by the laws of physics as we know them. They flowed, and as they moved, they seemed to sing. Not with words, but with a resonance, a vibration of joy that pulsed through the air. It was as if even the mountains themselves were celebrating, rejoicing just like I was. It was wonder, pure and unfiltered, and I drank it in like a man who had been thirsty his whole life and had only now found water. And in that moment, I truly believed I was staying. I thought to myself, this is it. This is where I belong. I'm not leaving. The joy, the beauty, the overwhelming sense of belonging, it was too much to walk away from. But deep down, I knew I had to return to Jesus. And so I made my way back to him, but this time, I approached from the other side. For reasons I can't fully explain, I found myself going behind him before coming around to the same spot where I had first bowed before him. And once again, I couldn't stand it. I fell to my knees, my head bowed in reverence, overwhelmed by his presence. This time, I noticed something I hadn't fully absorbed before, the light coming from him. It wasn't just shining, it was alive. This radiant golden light poured from him like a river, and as it reached me, it wrapped itself around me, embracing me in warmth, in love, in peace so profound that I never wanted to leave it. It was like being held in the arms of eternity itself, like being bathed in the very essence of love. And then, for the second time, Jesus looked at me with those eyes, those deep, loving, knowing eyes. And he spoke again. No, it's not your time. Go back. Oh, how those words struck me. The first time, I had accepted them. But this time, I felt the weight of them, the finality. And yet, I still wasn't ready to leave. I soared over the trees once more, back to the place where I had first arrived. And just like before, I reached that invisible threshold, the place where I knew one more step would take me out of heaven and back to earth. So this time, instead of going to the left, I went in another direction, drawn by an irresistible curiosity. And oh, what wonders awaited me! I saw things I never expected, things that filled me with childlike awe. One of the most surprising revelations? The animals. I had never imagined how many animals would be in heaven, but they were everywhere. And they weren't just there as scenery, they belonged. They had a special place in heaven, and the joy they radiated was unlike anything I had ever seen on earth. They weren't afraid, they weren't burdened, they were free, existing in perfect harmony with everything around them. This experience changed me forever. Even now, back on earth, I see everything differently. I cherish my relationships more deeply, knowing that love and connection don't just matter in this life, they stretch into eternity. Every moment here carries a weight that extends far beyond what we can see. And though I had to leave that place, I carry it with me, deep in my soul. Because once you have seen eternity, once you have felt the presence of the one who made it all, you can never be the same again. One of the most astonishing aspects of my time in heaven was seeing the animals, both familiar and completely unknown. I saw creatures we have on earth, but I also encountered beings unlike anything I had ever imagined. They were breathtakingly beautiful, some resembling majestic versions of earthly animals, while others were beyond my ability to describe. Their forms were unique, radiant, and filled with the same joy that permeated all of heaven. But what struck me the most was the harmony. Every single creature, whether it was a gentle deer, a soaring bird, or one of the heavenly beings I had never seen before, existed in perfect unity. There was no fear, no aggression, no sense of survival at another's expense. They all moved together in a divine rhythm as if they were part of a great, celestial symphony praising God with their very existence. It was overwhelming in the best way possible. In that moment, I realized just how much God cares for all of His creation. Not just humans, but every living thing He has ever made. I regret that I didn't interact with them more. I was so captivated by Jesus, by my family, by the sheer wonder of being in heaven, that I didn't take the time to engage with the animals. But even from a distance, I could feel their joy. It radiated from them, a kind of pure, untainted happiness, as if they were constantly rejoicing in God's presence. They knew they were part of something eternal, something beyond anything we could grasp on earth. And then, of course, there was the beauty of heaven itself. Trying to describe it in earthly words feels almost impossible, like trying to capture a sunset with a single brushstroke. The colors, oh, the colors! They weren't just more vibrant than those on earth. They were alive. The light wasn't coming from one single source like the sun. Instead, it was everywhere. It wasn't harsh or blinding, but warm and embracing, wrapping itself around everything like the arms of a loving father. Even what we would call inanimate objects, rocks, pathways, the very air, felt alive. The trees swayed as if in worship, the flowers glowed with an inner light, the mountains moved in slow, rolling waves of majesty. And everything was in perfect harmony. No decay, no imperfection. Just beauty, beyond anything I had ever imagined, beauty that could only be described as divine. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. One of the most surreal things about my time there was how knowledge was given to me. It wasn't like learning on earth, where you have to study and process information. No, it was as if Jesus downloaded understanding directly into my spirit. Suddenly, I just knew things, deep, profound truths about God, about eternity, about life itself. It was like my mind had been opened to a reality that had always been there, but that I had never been able to fully comprehend before. Some of that knowledge faded when I returned to my body, but certain truths stayed with me. One of the most powerful realizations was about the depth of God's love. Before, I thought I understood His love, but in heaven, I experienced it in a way that shattered every previous idea I had. It wasn't just affection. It wasn't just care. It was everything. His love was heaven. It was the air, the light, the very fabric of existence. It was overwhelming, infinite, personal. I also gained a greater understanding of the choices we make on earth and how they echo into eternity. Every moment here has eternal significance. Nothing is wasted. Even the struggles, even the suffering, they all matter in ways we can't see yet. Another thing that was revealed to me was the reality of spiritual warfare. I saw it. I felt it. I became aware of the unseen battles constantly happening around us, forces of good and evil at war for human souls. It made me realize how much we underestimate the power of prayer, the importance of guarding our hearts, and the necessity of putting on the full armor of God as described in the Bible. We aren't just living day to day, we're engaged in a battle, whether we realize it or not. That knowledge completely changed my view of death. I don't fear it anymore, not even a little. I know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that it's not the end. It's a doorway, a transition from one existence to another, from something temporary to something eternal. That doesn't mean I'm in a hurry to die. I know I have a purpose here, and I want to fulfill it, but when my time does come, I won't be afraid. I'll step through that door with joy, knowing what's waiting for me on the other side. My perception of time itself has changed. In heaven, time doesn't exist like it does here. There's no past, no future, just the eternal now. That understanding has made me more intentional with how I spend my time here on earth. I no longer take moments for granted. I see the weight, the meaning, in everything I do, knowing that it all carries into eternity. One of the biggest surprises was seeing people in heaven that I didn't expect to see. It shook me. It humbled me. And it changed the way I view salvation. I used to think in rigid terms, who was worthy and who wasn't. But now I understand that God's grace is so much greater than we can comprehend. He sees hearts in ways we never could. It's not about a checklist of rules. It's not about being perfect. It's about knowing Jesus, truly knowing Him. That realization has made me much slower to judge and much quicker to extend grace. But perhaps the most significant takeaway from my experience was the message my grandmother gave me in heaven. She looked at me, with love so deep it nearly brought me to my knees, and she said, "Bring as many of us back with you as you can." That moment has never left me. It's imprinted on my soul. I know now that I was sent back with a purpose, to share what I experienced, to help others understand the reality of heaven, and to remind them of God's endless love. It's not just about me getting back there, it's about bringing as many people as possible with me. Every single day, I strive to live with the profound awareness that our actions here on earth echo into eternity. The choices we make, the love we give, the kindness we extend, they all matter far beyond what we can see. Has my near-death experience changed my relationships with others? Oh, absolutely. More than I could ever put into words. Before, I would go through life interacting with people more casually, sometimes even impatiently, without truly seeing them. But now I see every single person as someone deeply, profoundly loved by God. I feel it in my soul. Just as I experienced His overwhelming, all-encompassing love for me, I now recognize that He loves every individual with that same intensity. This realization has made me so much more patient, more compassionate, and far more intentional in how I love and care for others. It's as if my heart has expanded in ways I never imagined possible. I now have this burning desire to share the love I experienced in heaven with everyone I meet, because I want them to know just how precious they are in the eyes of God. And when it comes to my family, oh, my love for them has deepened in ways that defy words. I cherish every moment with them now because I see our relationships through an eternal lens. These connections aren't just for this life, they stretch beyond, into forever. I treasure my family more than ever because I now understand that love, true love, is one of the most lasting and meaningful things we can carry into eternity. You asked about animals in heaven. I have to admit, I was completely taken aback by how many I saw. They were everywhere, beautiful, radiant, and at perfect peace. I saw animals we have here on earth, but I also encountered creatures, unlike anything I had ever seen before. It was as if heaven was teeming with life in a way that made perfect sense, yet was beyond my earthly understanding. Everything coexisted in complete harmony, and for the first time, I truly grasped how much God values all of His creation. Not just humans, everything He made matters to Him. Did I interact with them? Not directly. My focus was on Jesus and my loved ones. But I could sense the animals' joy, their peace, their purpose. It was as if they were part of an eternal symphony, praising God in their way. The very atmosphere of heaven was filled with worship, and it was breathtaking. Now, when I talk about the beauty of heaven, I always struggle to find the right words, because earthly language just doesn't do it justice. Imagine the most vibrant, breathtaking colors you've ever seen, then multiply their brilliance 1,000 times over. The light, oh the light, was everywhere, yet it wasn't harsh or blinding. It was warm, inviting, and alive. Everything in heaven seemed to have a life of its own. The trees, the flowers, even things that appeared to be inanimate on earth had an essence, a presence, a depth that defies human explanation. There was no decay, no imperfection, no sense of anything being broken or incomplete. Every single thing was in a state of perfect harmony, reflecting God's glory in ways I never imagined possible. One of the most incredible things I experienced was what I can only describe as a download of knowledge from Jesus himself. It wasn't like hearing words spoken aloud. It was deeper, more immediate, like entire truths were suddenly planted directly into my soul. In an instant, I just knew things, about God, about heaven, about life's true purpose. Some of these insights faded when I returned to my earthly body, but others remained embedded in my heart forever. One of the most profound truths I grasped was the depth of God's love. I used to think I understood it, but what I encountered in heaven was beyond comprehension. It was overwhelming, consuming, infinite. I also gained a deeper understanding of eternity, of how every single choice we make here on earth carries weight beyond what we realize. And yes, I became starkly aware of spiritual warfare. Before, I had a vague notion that good and evil were at play in the world, but after my experience, I understood just how real spiritual battles are. There are forces, both divine and dark, constantly at work, shaping lives and influencing hearts. Many of the struggles we face have a spiritual dimension that often goes unseen, yet we must recognize them. This realization has made me so much more intentional about prayer and about fully embracing the protection of what the Bible calls the armor of God. And as my perspective on death changed completely, I no longer fear death at all. I now see it as nothing more than a doorway into something infinitely greater. That doesn't mean I'm eager to leave. I know that God still has work for me to do here. But when my time truly comes, I will walk through that door with peace, with joy, with an unshakable certainty that I'm stepping into a reality far more glorious than anything this world can offer. One of the most fascinating shifts in my thinking is how I now perceive time. In heaven, time doesn't exist the way we experience it here. Everything felt like an eternal present, an endless now. That realization has completely changed the way I live my life. I no longer stress over the fleeting difficulties of this world because I know they are just that, fleeting. What truly matters is how we use our time, how we love, and how we live with purpose, because every moment carries eternal significance. And then, perhaps one of the most humbling and eye-opening aspects of my experience, I saw people in heaven that I didn't expect to see. That alone transformed my understanding of salvation. It made me realize that God's grace is far wider, far deeper, and far more merciful than we often comprehend. It taught me to let go of judgment, to love more freely, and to trust that God's plan is greater than any human understanding. This experience has changed me at the very core of my being. It has reshaped my heart, my priorities, my relationships, my faith. I no longer just believe in heaven. I know it, I've seen it, I've felt its reality. And now, all I want is to live in a way that reflects that truth, sharing God's love and light with everyone I meet, until the day I finally go home for good. It's not about following a rigid set of rules or striving for perfection. It's about something far deeper, far more transformative. It's about accepting Jesus, embracing his sacrifice, and letting his love fill every corner of your soul. Before my near-death experience, I had certain assumptions about people's spiritual states, about who was in and who was out. But now I tread much more carefully. I've come to realize that only God truly knows a person's heart. We see the surface, but he sees the depths. His mercy runs deeper than we can fathom, and his love reaches further than we could ever imagine. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 2 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Has my experience changed my prayer life? Without a doubt. Prayer has become something far more real, more powerful, and more alive to me. Having stood in the presence of God, and having felt his overwhelming love in a way words can never fully capture, I now approach prayer with a new level of intimacy and expectancy. I no longer see it as just talking to God. I feel like I'm truly communicating with a loving Father who listens, who cares, who responds. My prayers are more open, more raw, more honest. There's no need to hold back, no need for formalities. He knows my heart, and I trust him with every part of it. You asked me to describe what it felt like to be welcomed into heaven. I wish I could bottle up that feeling and pour it out into words, but even the most beautiful language falls short. It was the most complete, overwhelming, soul-deep sense of belonging I have ever felt. Here on earth, we spend so much of our lives searching for acceptance, for approval, for a place where we truly fit. We battle insecurities, we struggle with feeling like we're not good enough, like we don't quite belong. But in heaven, those feelings simply do not exist. The very air around me, the grass beneath my feet, the light that bathed everything, it all seemed to be saying, "You belong here. You are home. We are so glad you've come." It was love in its purest, most unshakable form. And yes, this experience has changed how I view my physical body. I used to care more about appearance, about the things we so often stress over in this life. But in heaven, I felt more me than I ever have in my earthly body. I realized that while our bodies are important, they are merely temporary vessels for our eternal spirits. They are tools for our journey here, but they are not the essence of who we are. That understanding has shifted my focus. I now care far more about cultivating my spirit than worrying about outward appearances. One of the most breathtaking aspects of heaven was the colors. I wish I could fully explain what I saw, but earthly words simply don't exist to describe them. Imagine the most vibrant blue you've ever seen, the richest gold, the most dazzling green. Now understand that the colors in heaven make those look faded and dull in comparison. But it wasn't just that they were more vivid, it was that they radiated light from within. And then, there were colors I had never seen before, colors that aren't even part of our earthly spectrum. It was as if everything glowed with an inner life, each shade pulsing with divine beauty. And heaven itself, the scope of it, was unlike anything I could have anticipated. It was both intimate and infinite at the same time. When I was with Jesus, or surrounded by my loved ones, it felt deeply personal, as though I were wrapped in the most tender embrace. And yet, I also had this vast, breathtaking awareness of endless beauty stretching in all directions, limitless and magnificent. It was as though heaven expanded perfectly to accommodate all of creation in seamless harmony. You asked about how nature behaved in heaven, and oh, it was extraordinary. Everything was alive, not just in the way we understand life here, but in a deeper, more responsive way. The trees didn't just stand still, they moved, parting gracefully to welcome me. The mountains shifted like waves. The very light seemed to wrap around me, as though it had a consciousness of its own. Even things that we would consider inanimate here on earth pulsed with a sense of presence, as if they too were aware of God's glory and were constantly reflecting His praise. Did I get a sense of other people's experiences in heaven? Yes, in a way. While I was completely immersed in my journey, I could also feel this incredible unity among everyone there. Each soul was experiencing the same overwhelming joy, the same perfect peace, the same boundless love. And yet, somehow, it felt personal to each one of us, as if heaven was designed to embrace every person in the way they needed most. There was no division, no separation, just pure, unbreakable unity in love and worship. This experience has changed everything for me. It has reshaped how I see God, how I love others, and how I live each day. Heaven is not just a distant, far-off hope. It is a reality more real than anything we know here. And now, I want to live every moment with that truth burning in my heart, sharing His love, His grace, and His promise with everyone I meet. Because if I could give even a glimpse of what I saw, what I felt, it would change the world. You asked if I wanted to come back, and the honest answer is no. If I could have stayed in heaven, wrapped in that perfect love, bathed in the light of God's presence, I would have. Every fiber of my being longed to remain there. But I also understood, deep within my soul, that my time on earth wasn't finished. It wasn't just a command to return. It was a calling, a purpose. God had a reason for sending me back, and though my heart ached to stay, I knew I had to trust Him. That trust gave me peace, even in the sorrow of leaving. Now, I see my life here as a mission, a precious opportunity to share what I've experienced and to help others prepare for eternity. Worship. Oh, how my understanding of worship has changed. Before, I thought of it as something we do, singing, praying, lifting our hands. But in heaven, worship was not just an act, it was existence itself. Every breath, every sound, every movement radiated praise. The trees, the light, the very air. It was all in harmony, glorifying God, not out of duty, but out of sheer, overwhelming love and joy. Worship was woven into the fabric of being. And now, when I worship here on earth, I do so with a fire in my heart that I never had before. I long to worship as I did there, with total abandon, completely immersed in love. While I was in heaven, I had no awareness of what was happening on earth. My body, my surroundings, the worries of this world, all of it faded away in the presence of God's glory. I wasn't looking down, watching events unfold. I was fully, completely consumed by heaven. It wasn't until Jesus spoke to me, telling me it wasn't yet my time, that I became aware that I had a choice to make, whether to return. And though it was painful to leave that divine perfection, I knew that my life still had a purpose. That realization has transformed how I live every single day. Now, everything I do carries a new weight, a deeper significance. My work, my daily activities, even the most mundane tasks, have become opportunities to bring a piece of heaven to earth. Before, I might have seen work as something to get through, and chores as something to check off a list. But now I see them as moments infused with eternal purpose. Every interaction, every kindness, every decision is a chance to reflect the love and joy I experienced in heaven. I don't want to waste a single moment. You asked about prayer, about how prayers from earth are received in heaven. While I didn't see prayers arriving like messages, I had a deep, undeniable sense that there was a constant, unbroken connection between heaven and earth. God is not distant. He is not an observer watching from afar. He is intimately involved in our lives, deeply attuned to our hearts, always listening. Prayer is not just words. It is a bridge between the seen and the unseen, a direct link to the very presence of God. And I now understand, more than ever, how powerful that connection truly is. And then, there were the angels. Oh, the angels. They were not the soft, delicate beings we often imagine. They were radiant, powerful, and full of purpose. They were constantly engaged in worship, but also in carrying out God's will with precision and devotion. I sense that their presence on earth is far greater than we realize, that they move among us, unseen, guiding, protecting, ministering, always in submission to God's authority. They are not separate from us. They are part of God's great plan, woven into the fabric of His love and care for humanity. This experience has forever changed how I relate to people, especially those who don't yet believe. Before, I sometimes felt frustrated when others rejected faith when they couldn't see the beauty of God's love. But now, I have a much deeper patience and much greater compassion. I understand that each soul is on its journey, NDE, that God's love reaches far beyond human understanding. I don't try to push or persuade. I simply share, inviting others to glimpse the incredible truth I've been blessed to witness. Love, not argument, is the key. Love, not fear, is what draws hearts to Him. You asked about free will, and about how it works alongside God's sovereignty. This is one of the great mysteries, and even with all that I saw and experienced, I can't fully explain it. But I did gain a deeper understanding, a sense that God's love is so vast, so perfect, that He allows us true freedom. He doesn't force us to choose Him. He gives us real choices, even when those choices lead to pain. And yet, His sovereignty is never threatened, never diminished. He is always working, always redeeming, always bringing beauty out of brokenness. Even when we turn away, He is still there, arms open, ready to bring us back into His love. This experience has changed everything for me. I no longer see this life as my home, but I treasure it as my mission. I no longer fear death, but I cherish each day I am given. I no longer worship out of routine, but with a heart set on eternity. And more than anything, I long to bring as many souls as possible into the love I have known, the love that waits for us all, beyond anything we can imagine. Did I gain insights into the nature of evil or the presence of suffering in the world? Yes, though not in the way I expected. I never saw or felt evil in heaven. How could I? Heaven is the very essence of God's presence, a place where love, joy, and peace radiate from every corner. But it was in that perfect goodness that I came to understand evil more profoundly than ever before. Evil is not a force equal to good, nor is it something created by God. It is, at its core, a separation from Him. It is the absence of His presence, a twisting of what He designed to be beautiful. In heaven, where every blade of grass, every note of music, and every living being exists in perfect harmony with His will, there was simply no room for darkness. It was like standing in the brightest sunlight, so warm, so overwhelming in its brilliance, that I suddenly understood what shadows truly are. Here on earth, we live in those shadows. Pain, loss, hatred, fear. These things exist because humanity has turned away from the fullness of God's presence. It's not that He has abandoned us, but rather that we, through our choices, have distanced ourselves from Him. It made me realize just how much we need His light in this world. Every act of kindness, every moment of forgiveness, every choice to love instead of hate, it all pushes back against the darkness. And in that sense, we are called to be vessels of heaven, bringing glimpses of His kingdom into a world that so desperately needs it. That understanding has completely changed the way I see suffering. It doesn't mean suffering isn't painful or unfair. It is. But I now know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that evil is temporary. Pain is temporary. Darkness does not win. In the end, love, the kind of love I experienced in heaven, will heal all wounds. As for death, oh, how my view of death has changed. Before my experience, I feared death the way most people do. It was an unknown, an ending, a thing to be avoided at all costs. But now I see it for what it truly is, not an end, but a doorway. A transition from this temporary, flawed existence into something so magnificent, so breathtakingly real, that our earthly lives feel like mere shadows in comparison. When I was in heaven, I felt more alive than I ever had before. Every part of me, my mind, my soul, even what felt like a version of my body, was pulsing with life in a way I had never known. The colors were more vibrant, the air was thick with love, and joy wasn't just an emotion, it was an atmosphere. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't longing for anything because I had already arrived at the place where all longing was fulfilled. And if I could have stayed, I would have. Without hesitation. But God had other plans. When I was told I had to go back, my heart ached in a way I can't fully describe. Imagine being embraced in the warmest, safest, most love-filled hug you've ever experienced, then suddenly being pulled away. Imagine seeing the most breathtaking sunset, feeling it surround you, and then in an instant, being taken back to a dark, windowless room. That's what it felt like. It wasn't just leaving a place, it was leaving a reality of absolute perfection. But even at that moment, I knew that my return wasn't without purpose. God didn't send me back to live aimlessly. He sent me back with a mission. So now, I live differently. Every breath, every moment, every act of kindness has meaning. I no longer view life as something to endure, but as something to embrace, something to use. We are not here by accident. We are not here to merely exist. We are here to love, to grow, to bring light into the darkness. Knowing what awaits me when this life ends makes me cherish my time here even more. I want to make every second count, not out of fear, but out of gratitude. Because now I understand, this life is just the beginning. What do I want people to take away from my experience? If I could open up my heart and let everyone feel what I felt in heaven, I would. If I could somehow show people just a glimpse of the love that surrounded me, the overwhelming joy, the absolute certainty that we are known, cherished, and never alone, it would change everything. I want people to know that God's love for them is not distant, conditional, or abstract. It is real, immediate, and more powerful than anything they have ever known. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Heaven is not a fairy tale. It is not some vague, distant dream. It is more real than anything in this world. Every color, every sound, every being in heaven is alive with a depth we can't even fathom. And the most incredible thing, it's waiting for us. Right now, at this very moment, heaven exists, and we are all being invited into it. Not because we are perfect, not because we have done enough good deeds, but because Jesus has made a way for us. That is what I need people to understand. Heaven is not about religion, rules, or trying to be good enough. It's about relationships. A relationship with Jesus. He is not a distant figure, not just a historical name. He is real. He is alive. And He is the key to the home our souls were created for. This experience has forever changed me. I no longer live in fear. I no longer see death as something to dread. Instead, I see life, every moment of it, as a precious opportunity to bring a piece of heaven to earth. To love more deeply. To forgive more freely. To live with purpose, knowing that every act of kindness, every word of encouragement, every moment of worship echoes into eternity. As we come to the end of this powerful journey through one person's life-altering experience, I want to take a moment to reflect with you. We've explored profound insights about heaven, God's love, and the eternal significance of our choices here on earth. The beauty, peace, and truth shared today are reminders of the eternal purpose we all have and the incredible love that surrounds us. So, what have you learned so far? What insight has touched you the most, and how do you plan to bring it into your own life moving forward? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share one thing you've learned and how you will practice it in your daily life in the comments below this video. And if this video has inspired you, don't forget to leave a like, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more uplifting content. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, every moment counts. Let's live with purpose, love, and joy, just as we were meant to. See you in the next video.